Hello. Welcome to episode 6, part 2. Yesterday I had the interview with Dr. Rebecca Ray, and oh my God, I don't know if you've listened to it yet, but that episode is just amazing. I just loved so many of the things that she shared. Now, in the interest of boundaries, I went into it asking her assistant, how long are we going to have? And she said, there's no limit. And so I thought, oh my God, great. That means I can ask so many things. So I went into it with lots of things to talk about. And then I entered the call with her and she said, oh, half an hour, 40 minutes maximum. And I went, oh, shit. So there's just so many things that we didn't get to cover, but I really like what we did cover because it really gives a taster. But I wanted to do a part 2 because I feel comfortable speaking on it, and I just want to share some more kind of boundary violations as well as reference some things that you guys have mentioned to me after watching part 1. The one thing that I absolutely love, which she talked about, which were that boundaries are non-existent until they're communicated. And what I see so much in society is that it's not that people expect that people will know where their boundaries are, but there's this like frustration if someone crosses a boundary. It's almost like this expectation, assumption that they've done it deliberately, right? And so, this is the work that I'm going into now, but I'll just kind of keep it where I was at back then. But there's this kind of, we need to make them the villain for this upset that we're feeling in ourselves. So often when you have boundaries crossed continually, what you'll begin to feel is resentment. And as Dr. Beck pointed out about my situation with work, I was the one who was actually crossing the boundaries. Even though I thought at the time that it was everyone else who was making me feel like that, it was actually me who was making the decisions to work those extra hours, and have that and cross the boundaries with my clients. I think that if we're going to move into this, if we're going to move into this new world consciousness, I think that one of the biggest things that we we want to do, one of the things, I don't know what that word is, one of the things that we should be doing is learning to communicate and not assuming that everyone should know what's going on for us. So, for example, if someone is late for dinner, instead of getting upset and maybe even leaving because you're upset because they've disrespected your time, right? There's that assumption that they've done it deliberately. They've disrespected your time because they're late, right? Instead of doing that, first of all, be curious. Hey, I thought we said 6 o'clock. It's now 6:30. What's going on? And then they'll say, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I just got lost track of time, whatever. And then you say, oh, okay, no problems. Just in future, if you're going to be late, could you just send me a text message so that I know, so that I'm not sitting here, wondering what's going on, right? So that's an easy, simple way to set a boundary that's not making the other person wrong or at fault for what's happened, because we're all human and so many things happen all the time that we can't control. And also, like, you never know what's going on with someone. Now, Dr. Beck goes into this in great detail in the book. The first step when we're setting a boundary with someone is to connect with our inner leader. And she just describes it incredibly. But just to reference the boundary that I communicated with my ex after he cheated on me. So the first step is to regulate yourself, because we can't communicate in a healthy way unless we're regulated. So that is to say, I need some space, I need some time. And then when you're in a regulated space, to then come back and communicate from that grounded and healthy boundary way. So she has this incredible step by step. It's called limits, and L stands for, so this is how to set the boundary. So this stands for L, which is connect with your inner leader, which again, she explains that in the book. I, identify the boundary that you want for yourself. So it's not always that someone has crossed, it's that you didn't know that that existed before. So now it's your responsibility to communicate that. Just like, you know, because everyone grows up with different values, and we can't assume that other people have the same values as us. And if we do walk around assuming that everyone thinks the same as us and values the same as us, we're just setting ourselves up for failure. So if that's you, start to be curious and go, oh, I wonder what that person values, you know, and say, for example, the person that's late for lunch or dinner, they might value downtime for themselves, and they didn't feel like they had enough downtime, so they needed a little bit more, and that's why they were late. Or they might value family. Maybe they had wanted to connect with their kids, or, you know, there could be so many other things that they value that put them in that situation where they were going to be late for the dinner. So identify the boundary that you want for yourself. Make the boundary known, so communicate it. I, introduce consequences if it continues to be crossed. So that's not something that you have to do at the first start. So it would be, for example, if you go to dinner with someone and they're late, and then you communicate that what you want from them, which is that for them to let you know, and then you go to dinner with them another 2 times and they're late every time and they don't let you know, then you can give them a consequence of, you know, I've communicated that this is what I want from you is to text me if you're going to be late. If this continues, I won't be going to dinner with you anymore. I love you. I just can't handle, you know, you being late. And so then it's on them to make the decision of if they want to change their behavior. And if not, then you follow through with those consequences. So T is take a stand and reassert the boundary if it's crossed. So just reassert the boundary. I mentioned last time that if you're going to be late, please text me beforehand so that I'm not sitting here wondering what's going on. And then S is a status check, because we're always changing. So what was a boundary for you 1 year might be different the next year, and that's okay. And I also want to talk about what it's like on the other end of the spectrum to have a boundary set from someone else and shared with you, because as someone who grew up not understanding what boundaries are and not knowing that I had my own boundaries or feeling empowered to set my own boundaries, when someone else set a boundary with me, I felt like they hated me. I felt like they didn't care about me. They didn't love me. And, you know, that's not to say that the way that they went about it was the best way, but regardless of how they went about it, I just took it completely wrong, because no one had ever set a boundary with me. So I was like, what do you mean? Like, don't you love me? Don't you like me? Like, I remember my best friend, when I was like 21, she said to me, Lauren, can you please stop texting me at 6 a.m. in the morning? It wakes me up. Can you text me after 9 o'clock? You can text me after 9 o'clock. And I was like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. I'm so sorry. Don't hate me. Like, and I thought she was not going to be friends with me. Like, right. But she's communicated in a very healthy way, not being emotional or anything. She's just stated what the issue is and then what she wants instead. But I just was so afraid that she wasn't going to be friends with me anymore. But yeah, then it became a joke. She'd get another text at 6 a.m. and be like, oh, that's Lauren. And then it wasn't me. And then she was like, oh, I'm an avid early morning texter because I wake up really early and my day's started. So if you have messaged me on Instagram at like 9:30, I'll message you back at like 5 a.m. And if that is crossing a boundary for you, then please communicate that with me because I would love to respect that boundary. The other thing that I wanted to really talk about, because I see this so much in our society, is this is my boundary and you have to deal with it, right? So this like wall of separation, and you're responsible for handling your emotions. I'm not responsible for them, right? And I don't know if you've seen like any other people on social media saying things like this, but I just want to like communicate and tell you that that's not what a boundary is, right? A boundary, as Beck said yesterday, a boundary is to bring you closer to someone, to teach someone how to love you. And I think that there's a misconception that boundaries are a wall to protect us. I just, even when I'm coaching new clients, they're like, yeah, but I'm not responsible for how anyone else feels. And I'm like, yeah, but I understand that. However, you can still be accountable for how your behavior has affected someone else, and you can still be considerate of someone else's feelings and emotions. When someone makes a request for us and a boundary, when someone says this is, say for example, with the dinner idea, in future, can you text me if you're going to be late so I'm not sitting here and wondering what's going on? So if you're the receiver of that, you have the right or ability to say yes or no, right? And if that's not something you can do, then you have the right to say that, and then the other person gets to decide if they want to continue this relationship with you. But it also might be, oh, look, I'm just really caught up with the kids. I don't know if that's something that I can do. How else can we work this to keep this relationship going? So it doesn't need to be a hard and fast, this is what it is, tough titties, deal with it. And I think that for so many of us who grew up in households where we were treated like this is the rules and you don't get to say anything else about it, we feel like when someone communicates to us, we're like, holy shit, that's the only option. Like it's either a yes or a no. I can't discuss or negotiate. We can't talk about it. And this is also starting that kind of level of emotional maturity and healthy communication where we're two adults talking to each other from that grounded place. And the really important thing is grounded place. And both of you don't have to be grounded. You are only responsible for yourself. And you're the one who needs to make sure that you're grounded. So if you're not grounded, if you're upset, if you're in your emotions, you need to be able to realize, take a step out and take some time apart until you're able to ground yourself, and then set up another time to do that. That's really, really important. So I just wanted to talk about some more boundaries that I was allowing people to cross for me. So the biggest thing is that when you have your boundaries being crossed, the feeling, the emotion that comes up is anger and resentment. So if you're feeling really angry towards someone else, no doubt that is because there's a boundary that's being crossed. There's a boundary that hasn't been communicated by you, and then they're crossing it and they're continuing to cross it, which is built up resentment. So I'll just share some examples. So when I was with my ex for 3.5 years, some of the boundaries, and so we were together when I started reading this book, and I was like, holy shit, like this is crazy. No wonder I'm so angry and resentful towards you, because you're crossing my boundaries, but I didn't even know that they were boundaries, and I didn't know how to communicate it, and I didn't know what to do. So no wonder I feel like this. And so, for example, I would always lend him money, and he would pay me back very slowly. But he would owe me a couple of $1,000 from a holiday, or because he couldn't pay rent or whatever. And then he would go and buy a new surfboard, a couple $100. And I was like, babe, like, you owe me money. And he's like, yeah, but this was on sale and I really needed it. And so then I was like, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. So I just let it go, because, you know, I dated this guy when I was 21, and he was like, talk about manipulation. I would bring up an issue with him and he would say, yeah, but what's more important, our relationship or the dishes, right? Because I'd be like, can you please help out around the house and do the dishes? And then he would put that line on me. He's like, having a clean house isn't important to me. What's more important, our relationship or the dishes? And so then I pushed away my desire for a clean house in order to maintain our relationship. So that's what I was doing here again, is I was like, okay, well, it's not worth starting a fight over, because he's got a point, right? Like, it's just so. And I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, right? Make a big deal out of it? Make a big deal out of setting a boundary around not lending him any more money or him paying me back. But I also didn't want to cause an argument. And then I wanted to go on a holiday, and I'd be like, let's go to Hawaii. And he'd be like, well, I can't afford that. And I'm like, it's okay, I'll pay and you can pay me back. So then I'd just add that onto his tab. And then he'd be like, oh, I'm out of money this week, I can't afford to pay you $100 back or whatever. And it was just like, at the end of our relationship, I think he owed me $4,500, which was like 8 weeks of unpaid rent. And it was just like ridiculous, right? But I let him do that. I didn't know how to communicate with him. And so reading the book just helped me realize, and also helped me learn how to communicate. So I'll just share another little story about my ex. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into some of the boundaries that I was able to communicate in a healthy way after my journey started and experience. And so with my ex, so he wouldn't help out around the house, and not helping out around the house is a boundary crossing. However, it's not something that's there unless it's spoken about. And this is where it goes to communicating in a healthy way, because what I see a lot of women doing is getting upset because their partners aren't helping out around the house or aren't doing things when they said they would do, or they've asked their partner to do something, but then they don't do it for 2 weeks later. And there's just this whole gap in expectations, which is boundaries, and communication. This book, if this is you, read the freaking book. So yeah, that was another boundary that he was crossing for me. And again, I was just like, what's more important, the relationship or you know, doing the dishes or mowing the lawn? I'll just do it. And so that was me being over responsible, but also crossing my own boundaries. Even though he'd said that he'd do it like 3 weeks later. And I'm like, babe, it needs to be done every week. You can't just do it when you feel like it. And he's like, and so then he'd get defensive, right? Because I'm not communicating from my grounded space or clearly, oh my God. So, yeah, so so after we broke up, I then lived by myself for like 16 months because before I met my boyfriend, I was like, I am never living with anyone again. It's horrible because I didn't understand boundaries. I didn't know how to communicate them. And so they were crossing my boundaries, living in my house. And I was just like, this is shit. I'm just not having anyone live with me because I don't know how to communicate and I don't know how to, I didn't know that. And so I lived by myself. I also needed space to heal. And then I was like, I'm doing all this healing work and I'm learning about boundaries and all this sort of stuff. And I was like, all right, I think it's time that I put myself back in a situation where I'm living with someone else so that I can practice all of these things that I've learned. But also I couldn't really afford $500 a week anymore. So I moved in with this guy and he's so lovely, just such a friendly, talkative person. And just he seemed so positive and, you know, everything was great. And then because we were getting to know each other, and then it got to where he was just like wanting to share like some heavy stuff with me like every night, and it just got too much. And so I just kind of started to avoid him, right? So that's if you read the book Setting Boundaries, that's one of the coping strategies is avoidance. So I just started to avoid him. I started to, you know, lock myself in my room. I had 2 rooms. I had my bedroom and then my lounge room. I just started to kind of lock myself away because I just didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to speak to him. And so this went on for quite a while. And then I would try and be out at night and then just come home for a couple of hours so that I didn't have to interact with him much. And I wasn't conscious, it wasn't conscious what was going on at that point. And you know, it was fine. I was able to deal with it and everything was fine. And then the universe brings you exactly what you need at exactly the right time to teach the lesson that you're ready to learn, right? So my car got battered, absolutely battered by hail. And then 2 months later, oh yeah, that's right. A couple of weeks before it got battered by hail, he reversed his trailer into my car by accident. And, you know, he was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I was like, it's fine, dude. I'm like, you'll fix it. Yeah. And he's like, yeah, absolutely. I'll fix it. I'll get it. I'll pay for it. I was like, okay, no worries. Then my car got battered by hail. And so, right. My car went away to get the hail damage fixed. So it was going to be 2 weeks. So I was going to be stuck at home without a car. And he has work and goes to work, but then comes home at 3 in the afternoon. And he's kind of, I think he's got depression. I'm not sure. But he just comes home and drinks like 8 beers and gets really drunk and gets really loud and he's quite inconsiderate. And, you know, he has the TV up really loud. And then at that time, he had a Balinese girlfriend and he was talking to her on the phone, but he'd have his phone on loud, on speaker in the lounge room, and my room was right next to it. And his voice just echoed in the whole house. And I could hear the whole conversation. And I was just like, I was so angry. I was like, oh my God, I fucking hate him. Like, I just was so angry. And then it hit me and I was like, oh my God. Actually, no, it didn't hit me. It hit me that something was wrong. And so I got one of my friends to take me to the beach and I spent a few hours in the water and I just soothed myself. I just was like, it's okay that you feel like this. It's okay. And then all of a sudden I just started crying. Like I started crying. All of this emotion was pent up. And because I wasn't able to leave my house, so I wasn't able to regulate properly. So it was just so much pent up emotion. And so I went and did that. And then after I released all of that emotion, I then realized that it wasn't anything to do with him. It was just that I wasn't communicating my boundaries. And I was like, oh my God. So then I come back home and I'm regulated, right? I'm in this regulated state, in touch with my inner leader. And so I go, hey, Maddie, I'd love to chat to you about something. Let me know when you've got time. And he was like, yeah, cool. Let's do that now. I said, okay, awesome. I just want to talk to you about the TV. What's been happening is I'm trying to go to sleep at 9, 10 o'clock, and the TV volume is quite loud and I can hear it in my room and I'm really struggling to sleep. What I'm going to need from you is just to turn it down when I go to bed. Is that okay? And he was like, yeah, of course. Oh my God, I didn't even know. And it's like, he didn't even know, right? He didn't even know that his behavior was impacting me. And that's what you'll find with a lot of people that are crossing your boundaries, is that they're not even aware of it. And the fact that I came to him with not accusing him of, you're doing this, you're disrespecting me. The way that he responded to me was awesome. Now, that boundary had to be set a few times and it got like, I was like, hey, Maddie, can you turn down the TV? He's like, I've already turned it down. I was like, I understand that you've already turned it down. However, it's really, really loud in my room. Can you please turn it down some more? And he's like, just wear earplugs. And I'm like, Maddie, we've had this discussion a couple of times. This is my house too. Can you please turn the TV down? It's only like half an hour before you go to bed. And he was like, yeah, all right. And he was having some pushback, which is so understandable because it was imposing on his watching time. Yeah. And what often happens is people get into the nitty-gritty, right? Of like, I've turned it down, it's on 30, that's nothing. And then you get arguing about what's going on. And that really takes you away from that boundary of, I'm trying to sleep, please turn it down. And I think that when you learn to connect with that inner leader, you have that worth, right? Beck was talking about that yesterday. You have that worth and knowing that I'm allowed to ask for the TV to be turned down, and his reaction isn't anything to do with me, and it doesn't mean that I can't, So then what also begun to happen was he would come home from work and I'd be like, hey, Maddie, how was your day? And he's like, oh my God, it was fucking shit. It was fucking shit. And then he'd go on this rage about how shit his day was and complain about everything on the earth. this person happened, this thing happened, and it was just too much. And and then I just didn't want to be around him anymore. And he's just such a complainer, and I can see that that's how he gets his needs met, right? Because he doesn't know how to he's never been seen or heard before. He doesn't have anyone to listen to him. So how he gets seen and heard is complain. We'll talk about that in another episode way ahead. But so he's complaining to me, and I'm just sitting there like, oh my fucking God, I hate this. And, I'm an emotion coach. So I'm doing hour and a half sessions with people talking about their deepest, darkest inner traumas. It's really heavy stuff, and I really need a safe, emotionally, psychologically safe environment that is positive and happy. And my first reaction was to be so angry, which is a sign that there's a boundary that's crossed for me. I was like, oh, you're such a fucking idiot. And then I was like, right, okay, there's a boundary being crossed. So I was just like, hey, Maddie, can we have a chat? And he's like, yeah, cool. He was always like, I really admire how incredibly mature he was in receiving those boundaries that I'm communicating with him. He was just awesome, and so receptive as well. And I said, I can see that when you come home from work, this is my boundary to him. I can see that when you come home from work, that you need someone to share your day with, and tell about what's happened, and get it off your chest. For me, I'm doing really heavy work coaching, and I really need a light, positive, and happy environment in my home space. And I just can't be the person who listens to what's happened in your day. I can imagine that this might be a little bit upsetting, but I'm just wondering if you can, call your mom or your girlfriend or something like that and tell them about it. And he was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't even realize. Yeah, of course. Oh my God. And he was just so fucking sweet. Hey. And, and then there were times when he'd come home and he'd start dumping on me, and I'd be like, I'm so sorry, Maddie. I'm just about to go into a session. He's like, oh yeah, cool, right? And so that's what happens. We assume that other people are doing it, that other people know our boundaries, and because we've communicated it, and that if they're crossing it a second or third time, that they're doing it deliberately. And I really just want to highlight and bring compassion and understanding, because we all have our own lives, and there's no way I'm going to be able to remember all the boundaries that everyone set with me. Actually, I can, because I am a recovering people pleaser, and I don't want to upset people. But, just give yourself some grace. If someone has set a boundary with you and you accidentally cross it, then you can be like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, right? And I think that makes the difference when someone says, oh, I'm so sorry, I totally forgot. How can we move forward? How can we make sure that this doesn't happen again? And it's that kind of repair and acknowledgement. I mentioned about my housemate earlier, how he reversed into my car and said that he was going to pay for it. So and you know how I said that the universe brings you exactly what you need in order to learn the lessons that you're ready to learn. Looking back, I can see that he was exactly like my ex-partner, exactly really liked music, liked surfing, liked plants, was really nonchalant about his life, terrible with money, like all of the things that my ex was, he was. And so this was an opportunity. Yeah, right. So it's really raining outside. I hope you can't hear that. So it happened in December when he reversed into my car and said he was going to pay for it. So then in January, I was like, hey man, when do you let's try and get my car organized? And he was like, yeah, I'm going to Bali for 3 weeks at the end of the month. So we'll do it when I get back. And then when he got back, I was like, hey man, let's do my car. And he's like, oh yeah, can you ring your insurance and see if you can put it under your policy and I'll pay the excess. And I was like, yeah, I will. I mean, I don't really want to do that. And I was like, can't you put it through your work insurance? He's like, yeah, but it'll make our policy go up. And I was like, yeah, but it'll make my policy go up. And he was like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I'll call and see. So then he rings his dad because he never really did anything for himself. His dad always did it. Remove judgment, Lauren. Yeah, he rang his dad. Insurance said that the best thing to do would be to put it through my insurance. And I was like, I don't feel comfortable doing that. Right. So I'm asserting a boundary because I'm not the one who fucking reversed into my car. Relax, Lauren. Yeah. So then he was like, okay, well, do you want to go around and get quotes to get it fixed? And I said, hold on, mate. I said, I didn't do anything to my car. You did everything. Why am I doing all the work? Which is not the correct way to communicate a boundary, but I wasn't, the tone in my voice was quite like, it was exactly as I just said it then. And he was like, oh yeah, you're right. Yep. No worries. My dad will come get your car and he'll take it around to port. And I was just like, and then I'm talking to my friends and they're like, oh, you've got your car and you're free, so you can go and do it. And I can just see how even that in itself is me crossing a boundary for myself because I didn't do it, even though I can do it and I don't work full time like he does. I'm not the one who crashed into my car. I'm not the one who needs to take responsibility for getting it fixed. So then he gets back from Bali. Yeah. 3 months go by and he still hasn't done anything about it. And I said, hey man, can we talk about my car getting fixed? And he's like, oh yeah, I've got a few bills. Like I just can't do it at the moment. And I got upset and I said, hey, this is not okay. You crashed into my car 5 months ago. This is ridiculous. This needs to get fixed, right? So I was being assertive and I mean, I guess I was reinforcing a boundary, but I was like, this needs to get fixed. And so what this situation reminds me of is of my ex borrowing money from me and not paying me back, right? And so I just let him go because he had all the excuses under the sun of why he couldn't pay me back. We were going on holidays. He was buying a new board. He had these bills coming up, this car service. Everything else was more important than paying me back. And I said, this needs to get fixed. This is not okay. And he was like, yep, okay, no worries. I'll ring my dad. Calls his dad and he goes, yeah, my dad's got you booked in for next week. And I was just like, how fucking hard was that, right? But I'd let him continue to cross that boundary for me. Does that make sense? So I was reinforcing that boundary, but I was also, I don't want to say accepting his excuses, but when he would push back at me, I'd be like, oh yeah, okay, no worries. Because like having a dent in my car wasn't a big deal, right? Going back to my boyfriends when I was 21, having a dirty house isn't a big deal, right? Yeah, so I really see how that was exactly the opportunity that I needed and exactly the housemate that I needed to learn to set and reinforce boundaries to heal from the boundary violations that I'd experienced my whole life. I just like, thanks, Maddie. I like to share with my clients that like a boundary, our society says that a boundary is a solid wall, but actually there's many different types of boundaries, and it depends on how receptive the other person is, but also how skillful you are in communicating that, because whether someone else is receptive or not doesn't mean that you can't set a boundary and consequences without setting a wall. So a lot of our society is like, this is my boundary and you can't cross it, right? So it's like you're here and you're going, oh, I don't even know what's on the other side. And so what I say to my clients is we begin to bring down the wall and we say there's an invisible line here and you can't cross it. And if you do, then this is what will happen. And then this person has the choice whether to cross it or not. And if they cross it, then the consequences are in place. So another example is I mentioned in the podcast that my psychologist said that I need to start setting boundaries. So after my dad passed away, my mum was obviously incredibly upset. She'd also lost her mum 10 years earlier. So she had no nurturing figure to talk to. And yeah, she just needed someone to talk to about her 30-year marriage and, her husband dying. And I just lost my dad, and I had someone to talk to, but she didn't. And so she was talking to me and I was trying to be there and be her support. And that was really difficult on me. It was really upsetting and affecting me. Some of the things that she was telling me, and or just everything, like it was just too much. I couldn't handle it. And my psychologist said, you can say to her, Mum, I know that you need someone to talk to, and I just can't handle this at the moment. I've lost my dad too, and I can't be that person that you speak to. I'm so sorry. Would you be open to going to see a psychologist or a counselor? I can help you find someone. And my mom was like, oh, yeah, of course, no worries. But then what ensued was she would still unconsciously want someone to talk to. So she would ring and then she would start talking about it. And I would have to reassert that boundary, right? Mum, I'm so sorry. I've told you I just can't be here and listen to you talk about Dad. And that's all I needed to say. And then I would say, Mum, I'm so sorry. I can't talk to you about this. If you're going to continue, I'm going to have to hang up. And it's hard. It's hard. It's tough to say that. I mean, my mum lost her fucking husband. My mum, like, I can't even imagine the pain that she was going through. But I couldn't handle it, and I needed to look after me because I'd always been looking after everyone else. That's why I was in this situation I was in. That's why I felt the way that I did, because I never looked after myself. And, for my mom, it might have felt like I was abandoning her, like I wasn't there for her, like I didn't care about her. But that's the opposite of the truth. The truth is that I deeply wanted help for her, but I just couldn't give that to her. One of the biggest boundary violations that I see everywhere and every day is people giving advice without being asked. Crazy, right? That's a boundary violation. Or giving solutions, and judgments, their own solutions and judgments. And you'll notice that that's when, you'll speak to someone and you'll just talk about something and they'll tell you that that's wrong, you shouldn't have done that, blah, blah, blah. And you'll feel like, why do I feel sad or like uncomfortable? How come I feel like this? It's because they've crossed a boundary by giving you judgment or advice. Learning to have healthy boundaries for yourself is learning to ask permission for things. So when someone talks to you and you want to give them advice, you say, do you mind if I give you advice? And then they can say yes or no. And even if they do say yes, they still might not take it because that's their own responsibility. But also, the other thing is oversharing. So, as a teenager, I didn't know how to get other people to listen to me. I didn't know how to be seen or heard. I didn't know how to get someone to care for me. So I would constantly overshare because I needed someone to talk to, but I was crossing their boundaries. I wasn't taking into account their own personal limits and what was going on in their life at the moment. And it's so, so common. I see, I was speaking to one of my friends the other day, and she said that I rang and spoke to my friend and she shared everything that was going on in her life. And then I was like, great, it's my turn to share. But the girl, her friend, said, I can't listen to this. And she just felt so incredibly deflated because she was like, but that's not how it works. You share and then I share. Like, that's how it works. And so what I can see is that the friend set a boundary, but my friend didn't set a boundary because she couldn't handle the other person's sharing and what was going on in their life. But she thought that in order to be listened to, she had to listen to what was going on in their life. And then when they weren't able to listen to what was going on in her life, she felt upset. So can you see that there? And so what I try to, and hi to all my friends, what I try to do, and this is ongoing practice, is to ask, hey, I really need a safe space to just share something that's going on in my life. Can you listen to me? And then they can say, look, babe, I'm really not in the right headspace. I can't at the moment. And I'll say, absolutely fine. I'll find someone else or I'll figure it out. Right? That's their right. And that's my responsibility. If someone is sharing with you and you don't have the capacity, again, like Dr. Beck said, you check in with yourself. You go, okay, can I deal with this right now? And if you can't, you just say, hey, babe, I'm really I've got a lot going on and I really can't listen to this right now. Is it okay if, you find someone else, or I've just got a lot going on today. Can we make a time for the weekend so I can give you my time and energy? And I think that's a really, really great thing to start introducing with your friendship groups. And what will sometimes happen, because if you're in a moment and you're in an emotion, sometimes you aren't able to access that inner leader, as Dr. Beck says. And so you don't have the skills to communicate, hey, I'm experiencing an emotion, can you talk? And so sometimes with my friends, I'll be like, oh, fuck, I forgot to ask if you had space for this. And they're like, that's okay, babe, right? Because it's a one-off thing. It's not an ongoing thing that I'm always dumping my shit on them without taking into consideration what's going on in their life. And I just want to finish this off with saying that, and I love how Dr. Beck said that men and women are so different, and men just, they have this innate sense of worth and they know their boundaries. And so I've gotten into this new relationship and my boyfriend has incredible boundaries. And he said, I think that I asked him, can I share something with him, right? I'm thinking I'm doing my due diligence, and then I've shared, and then he's gotten upset with something that I've said, and it's escalated. And then, you know, so then the next day we've talked about it, and I said, you know, it wasn't my intention. I can imagine that me sharing, especially after such a long day working, might have been so overwhelming for you. What was that like? And then we talked about it. And so then we both shared what was going on for us, and then we came to a solution. I said, you know, what can we do moving forward so that you're not feeling overwhelmed and so that I'm able to feel heard and seen by you? And he's like, I always want to be there for you, but I just don't have the capacity after work during the week. I'll make all the time in the world for you on the weekends, but I just can't do it during the week, right? So he's communicating his boundary. He doesn't have the capacity for heavy conversations during the week, and he'll give me all the time that I ask for on the weekends. And then he was like, but you can still share stuff with me, right? So can you see how if we didn't have those communication skills, it could have gone, you don't like me, you don't support me, you're not able to see and hear me, because he reacted in a way that wasn't what I had hoped for when we had that initial conversation. However, when we were able to take space and both access our inner leaders and reflect, and then come to the space with that loving awareness, we were then able to have a different conversation and talk about how to get both of our needs met in a way that serves both of us. Beautiful. All right. Thank you. Thank you for listening to part 2. I would love nothing more than if you were to reach out on Instagram, send me a message, send me a DM. That's what the cool kids are saying these days. Send me a DM. Let me know what your biggest takeaways were, what your biggest aha moments were, and maybe I'm more than open to hearing if there's something that you didn't like about this episode, or something that you really think that I missed, or that you want me to talk on in a future episode. I would love all the feedback in the world. And if you like this episode, please share it with your friends. Bye.